Yo, YouTube, we're back with the C-Mass Show, Catholic Masculinity with our bros here. And today we're going to talk about, life and work balance. So why work-life balance for married Christian businessmen with kids? Let me pause myself here. So I surveyed my email list. I think I surveyed you guys on YouTube as well a couple weeks ago, asking specifically what are the biggest challenges facing married Christian businessmen with kids. And the answer overwhelmingly was how to balance it all, right? Like, how do you fulfill your vocation as a husband, as a father, but at the same time, you know, you're required to provide. And so you're building a business. And sometimes if you're like the three of us here, you're building your business from your home. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not, but there are definitely some insights I think that we could share that might support some of you guys who are struggling to be good dads, right? Be there for your kids, be good husbands, fulfill your wives' every desire, and also dominate, crush it as a warrior, right? Like, I tend to think that the modern day warrior is the entrepreneur. Like, we're doing battle on the economic front, right? And that's not to diminish guys who are literally carrying guns and blowing shit up. But for the most part, for most of us, you know, we're going work against the world and we're, you know, carving our way out. So we can't diminish that at all. I think there's a tendency to sort of diminish that, like, oh, you know, that's not as important. Do whatever you have to do to make money. But it's like, well, I think God calls us to a specific type of work. I know the three of us, the work that we do furthers his kingdom. So it's sort of evangelizing and spreading the gospel and at the same time bringing home the bacon. So I figured I'd use this as an opportunity to get some insight from my guests, Will Nolan, Tim Gordon. You guys know these dudes. So let's begin with this. I'll throw this out and then, you know, Will, you can answer. Tim, I'd love to hear your insight. So the first thing I think would be insightful for our audience to hear is what exactly your work-life situation looks like, right? So I'll kind of leave that open-ended so you guys can pick that ball and run. Go ahead, Will. What does it look like in your house, man? You know, working, family, how's it go?
So until I got fired for a lecture on patriarchy from the top all-boys school in England, I've been working in schools of different sorts for nearly 20 years. And for the last 8-9 of those, it was in a boarding school. So the kids live on site and the teachers are available 7 days a week and you're living on campus. So I was out from around 8:30 in the morning until probably about 6:30 most evenings, and then also had to go in and do some duties in the boarding houses where the boys were staying obviously until midnight, and then out all Saturday as well with sports teams driving around the country, coaching rugby, athletics, whatever it might be. So that was many, many hours a week. And I had to just make a point that when I was at home, I was able to spend time with my kids, help them with schoolwork, whatever it might be. Since getting sacked, I've been in charge of my own schedule, and I lost my house when I was sacked as well. And the thing I was sacked over, most schools wouldn't want to employ me. So I've accepted that even if I wanted to work in a school again, I probably wouldn't be able to, but I don't even want to. I like the entrepreneurial life. I trust the market more than I trust a boss in this woke culture, because you never know when that sword of Damocles over your head is going to fall. So I've had the problem now of basically being in charge of my own working hours, having lost my house and been put into a bad financial situation with a wife and lots of kids to support. And the pressure of the temptation to just work every hour possible that comes in the day, because you want to make sure that you're going to be in a good situation if you don't have much money coming in the next month, you haven't got a steady paycheck. And it's been difficult to actually turn down extra work and say, no, that is enough, because I've met my bills and now it's more important that I spend time with my family. So I was reflecting on this, thinking what I've learned. And I tweeted the other day that a man who works 70 hours a week to earn $130,000 a year is at a far greater risk of being a bad father than a man who works 35 hours a week to earn 65K. That's actually the average for the US. 65K is the average salary. 35 hours a week is the average total working hours. So it might sound pretty cool to people to think, yeah, I'm going to go for 130 and double it. But you're also working twice as many hours. Consequences of that, your family will lack leadership because if you aren't there in the house most of the time to be making the important decisions and show them the right path to be walking, then they can easily be left rudderless. And also your wife will lack companionship too. A lot of the times when you see that people's marriages are falling apart is because they aren't paying attention to each other. They might not even spend much time with each other. So the idea that money is masculinity, I think that's a myth, and it can be emasculating.
So you work from home now. Let me ask you, prior to your bringing your work home, how did you manage it when you were outside of the house all the time?
Leave it at work. So when you've done your contracted duties and you've got your free time at home, turn off your phone, don't answer those emails, don't take on extra things that you think is going to be important. Just set limits to what you're doing.
Got it. So just for you guys who are listening, who are just joining us, so you're aware, we're speaking with my guests on the CMAS show about work-life balance, how to make sure that you're fulfilling all your obligations and balancing these things out well in a way that is conducive to life. Tim, you're also a married Christian businessman, entrepreneur, working from home, got lots of kids. How do you manage it all?
My story is really similar to Will's. Of course, I was fired from a career of being a Catholic school teacher, and I wasn't a board-in teacher, so I didn't have my family there at the school. But we got fired around the same time. I think I was a few months before he was. Mine was for a different cause, taking on Black Lives Matter and Father James Martin, SJ. But I mean, honestly, pretty similar narratives, so I won't have to reinvent the wheel. As a teacher, it was easier to direct work-life balance when you don't live there and you're not on call. I mean, I had a great job. That was a great job. I was coming from doing a year in a law firm where it was 60-hour weeks, and I had to pass, and it was a small law shop. In 2013, I worked for. I had to pass my boss's office to go home, and it was kind of up to me, but he kind of always looked like this, even if I wanted to make it home before dark. I was literally the only person who was not divorced in the entire law shop. And he'd always kind of like do this. And I knew I didn't, even though I had a law degree, I didn't want to do law long term. It was kind of just until I could get my old job back as a teacher. Because of complexities with the way my firstborn, Abby, had so many brain surgeries. So that it was really hard to balance work and life. And one time that law boss sat me down. He called another one of the lawyers in that was about to make partner. And he was like, so Bernie, both of us had lawyer dads, Tim. I know you have kids and you love your wife and kids a lot. But Bernie, do you ever remember seeing your dad before you were 5 or 6 years old? And Bernie goes, no. It was like this, like performance. I was supposed to see that and be like, oh, that sounds really good. I guess that's what I need to do to go the extra mile. And we'll just say Rob was like, yeah, me neither. And I was like, I want to get the fuck out of here even sooner. So I was already talking to the school that was going to hire me back. And I was like, okay, guys, I mean, I can get home late. Whatever you require me to do, I'll do it. I want to make I was like, is the quality of work good enough? They're like, yeah, but you can do more of it. You can do more of it if you stay that much longer. So when I went back to that Catholic school, that I'd taught at just for a year or two before I'd gotten all the extra degrees, a law degree and my philosophy degree in Rome. I was so appreciative. Working 35 hours a week, which kind of felt like a lot since these were my first real jobs, was teaching for 2 years, 10 years earlier. I was like, wow, 35 hours a week, that's that feels somewhat busy. Coming from the law shop, working 60-hour weeks with no built-in truncation of the workday, where you always are kind of made to feel guilty and gaslit about going home and you have to pass the boss's hour. I went to a school where there's literally a bell, the bell demarcated time periods, and you could peace out basically whenever you wanted after the bell. So I really did enjoy going back, and I kept that job for 6 years, which is the longest I ever kept one job. I've done a lot of stuff. I've been a lawyer, I've been a landman in a few different oil and gas companies. I've been a teacher a couple different times. Literally the only challenge to work-life balance as a teacher is if you take on adjunct college teaching, which I used to. I used to teach in Southern California community colleges. And you can take as many of those, and they're a nice chunk of cash extra, which you do need as a teacher. So aside from doing that, I naturally like to just spend time with my family anyway. Since I got fired over 3 years ago and then came here to Mississippi, and now I just do this stuff full time. Most of what I do is appearances on other people's shows, along with producing 3 extra shows a week. I published 4 books in 4 years, so that was busy. But I'm the kind of guy that's like, once I'm done up here, I turn out the lights. It's a 1.5 story house, so this is the only part of the house that's upstairs. When I go downstairs, I just start wrestling with the kids, and the kids know they have my attention. So today's actually the first day back of homeschooling, so I'm going to go down and homeschool them once we finish here. But it's a similar demarcation. Once I'm downstairs, my time is pretty much my wife and kids.
So I had this question asked to me by an entrepreneur friend, good friend. He makes millions. It's funny. He was a kid who trained at my gym when he was in college. He played basketball, and he'd watch over my shoulder on my breaks while I was, doing internet marketing back then. And now he's a total gangster. Still a young man. I think he may have just turned 29 or almost 30. And he says to me honestly one day, he's like, Elliot, do you ever think he doesn't want to have children. He doesn't want to have a family. That's his thing. He says to me one day, he says, Elliot, do you think you'd be further along? Don't you think your business would be so much better and you'd be making so much more if you didn't have a family? And it was an interesting question. Of course, I shot back real quickly. I was like, yeah, this is just who I am. Of course, I'm coping for myself. What are your thoughts, Tim, on, do you ever lament like, man, I'd be a better businessman if I didn't have to go downstairs and wrestle, if I didn't have to deal with these kids, if I didn't have a family, like maybe I'd be making lots more money?
Probably by consequence, and I know it sounds like the cope he was after, maybe he was after, but by motivation, absolutely not. This might be a starker dichotomy in my answer than it would be in Wells, because when I was being reared as a young man, going to a fancy school, 9th and 10th grade, I hated it. Wear a blazer and a tie every day from October 15th to March 15th, all boys school. I hated it. And that's when I started saying 9th and 10th grade, I just want to grow up. I just seen Men at Work. Do you remember that movie? Either of you guys, with Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen?
Oh, wow. Yeah, 1980s, right?
Yeah, the surfing garbage men. I was like, look, I when I grow up, Mom and Dad, I don't want, I'll be educated because I like that. I was always good at school, but I always was finding shortcuts to be good at school. I like languages. I like my lit classes. I like philosophy. But I'm like, I'm not one of these guys. I don't want to grow up and be an attorney or a doctor like all these other dudes that I was in school with, in blue blazers with, from October 15th to March 15th. I don't like it. I don't like the fancy clothes. I don't like the go. And I was very right wing. I was never like, I wasn't a stoner. I never smoked pot in my whole life. You know, was not a hippie, hated hippies. You know, I'm a totally different mindset. So, and I was good at school, excelled in the hardest classes, but I'm just like, I want to do something physical. And I saw Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez is dope. You know, they get up, they get their workday out of the way early, and then they go hit the good breaks at 3:30, 4 at the end of the day, where you hit the good breaks and find good places to surf. I think that's sick, and I still kind of do. So I'm more prone to doing what you have to do to really enjoy every day and getting by. Now, I do get to do that, right? As Will knows, getting fired is the best thing for you because I make a lot more money now and whatever. But I'm just not that tempted by trappings of wealth. And also, I think part of your motivation is fixed by what you grew up with. Mm-hmm. Like my parents always had lots of money. So I was like, this isn't, you don't put it on a pedestal. Aristotle says, the sick man will define eudaimonia falsely as health. The poor man will define eudaimonia falsely as wealth. It's just what you don't have. And once you get a little wealth, in my view, I'm an Aristotelian. You're like, okay, this is great. It's necessary. Better to have more. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not, or however that goes. Mm-hmm. Need it and not have, whatever. I just butchered it. Sorry, Nanny McPhee. But fuck. But whatever. You want to have it and be able to say, no, I don't need to do so much. I just know Tucker Carlson was incredibly insightful when he said, I've wasted money on so much shit in my life. What you'll never waste is time, because you can't get time back. It's so much more valuable than money. And that's just always been my philosophy. I have 7 kids. My wife, Steph, is my best friend. I'd rather, if we're good to go and I've done something meaningful for the day, I'd rather just like go down and see what the wife and kids are about. So I think the question was posed to you as like, ever passing up on a dollar is immoral or something. Maybe that's not how he meant it. I just don't have a problem saying, yeah, sure, I passed up tons of dollars because of my wife and my kids. In law school, I would be heading off to Children's Hospital where I did a bunch of my studying because my daughter, in the midst of law school, was just having brain surgery and issues and neurological issue after neurological issue. Mm-hmm. All the other kids would be going to the library for, 3, 4, 5 times as much study as me. And I'm like, I'm good at the work-life balance inherently. I like to work smarter, not harder. And I operate on a kind of 80-20 principle. So it's an easy one for me to answer.
Yeah. Well, I'll chime in and admit my guilt, especially when my children were very young. And I'm not totally sure that I would do things differently, but when we first moved down to Florida, my youngest was born, and we very quickly, started popping him out. But that's when I was building up my gym, and I would get to the gym at 6 a.m. and I would get home at like 8, 9 p.m. I was there all day, and Colleen was with the kids all day, and she would take them places. She had like mom's groups, and she stayed busy. She kept the kids busy, but for the most part, I would only see them, which was good, on my lunch break. I'd come home on my lunch break, and I would take a nap. I remember this. I'd take a nap. I'd lay on the couch sideways, and my daughter would sit on my hip, and she'd watch TV. So and that was like our special time together. But for the very first few years, when my daughters were really small, it wasn't that I wasn't there often. I got to do the wrestling in the evening, but I was breaking my face, and it was never a question. My dad's a workaholic, but not in a bad way. He was there, but when he was home, his presence was strong, and I think that's sort of what I adopted. It was like, I might not be there all the time, but when I'm home, I'm home. When my dad, same thing. He worked from morning to night. Plus he had a garage. He fixed cars in our garage. So he'd come home and he'd go back to work. But there was no mistaking when dad was home. Mom knew when dad was home. Mom would warn us, dad's coming home. We'd be warned that when dad gets home, something's going to happen. And when dad came home, we knew. So even though his physical presence, and maybe when my children were young, before I started working at home, weren't there, our essence was there. I don't know if that makes sense. Even the remembrance of my dad was there. It's like, okay, that guy exists and his power is present even though he's absent. And I thought that was important. I kind of adopted the same sort of way, especially when we were young, when the children were young. Nowadays, the three of us sort of live the same sort of lifestyle where my children are literally outside that door and my wife is homeschooling them right now. And we're going to get off this call and they're going to see me. I'm going to walk out. Maybe I'll go walk the dogs or, I'll crack a joke. Well, my kids are all teenagers now, so it's a little different. I'm not, tossing them into the pool and, wrestling with them and stuff. But, there's usually a lot of jokes, a lot of lightheartedness. And there's always dad home. Dad's always home. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I heard that lowers testosterone and it turns you into a woman, but I'll deal with it. I love being home. I love being here. I love knowing that I can walk out the door at any moment and I know where all my children are. My children know where I am. I remember listening to the audible version of an amazing book called Iron John by Robert Bly. Not necessarily a Christian book, but there are themes in this book that are very supportive to the masculine path. And he talks about fatherlessness, and he talks about it specifically in terms of how fathers, after the agrarian age and we started going into the industrial age, fathers would be carted off, I guess you could say, to the mines or to the cities, and they would be completely absent from the family's life for hours at a time. And that was that never happened before. It was always a dad worked at home because it was agrarian. It's like, hey kids, you're going to get out there and you're going to work with me too. You know what dad is doing. You can see dad work. You're familiar with his presence. Well, he describes what happens when the father was forced to begin leaving the home during this industrial so-called revolution. And he says that a hole is left in the boy's heart, and in that heart, demons fill it up. And he started describing the demons. He says the demons of suspicion, mainly suspicion and words that are associated with it, meaning when the boy can't see and doesn't know what his dad does, when the children can't put their finger on what exactly my dad does, suspicion starts to arise, and therefore a lack of trust. They start to believe that older men, and this is like present in our society now. Older men in authority, must be up to something pernicious. They must be up to something evil or something bad, because my experience has been that dad leaves. I don't know what he's doing, but he comes back and he has money. Maybe he's doing something wrong out there. Maybe he's doing so, and that's a part of the narrative today, is that men are out there doing bad stuff. Women say that maybe they're cheating, and then the children begin to adopt that sentiment, thinking that like maybe dad's doing something criminal or something immoral or something wrong out there. I think it's important. I pose this question to a lot of men who struggle with their own masculinity. I ask them, well, what does your dad do? And the ones that struggle the most, that at least know their dad, they don't know. Oh, my dad, does something in an office. All right, well, what is his job? Well, they'll give you a title, but they're like, but what does your dad do? I really don't know. So you have no idea what your dad does all day? No, that's a wound that can create a problem. I love that my kids can walk in here any time throughout the day, and they can observe me. They see you guys, your kids. I don't know if they watch your videos on YouTube, but they know that like I can see what my dad's doing. There's video evidence that my dad's doing good work, rather than it being a mystery. So that's my little piece on that. Let's round the circle again real quick. And so we shared our experiences. What advice would you give to a man, just general advice? We have some specific questions here that I'm going to dive into. Thank you guys for sending your questions, and continue to do so. We'll get to those in a moment. But just some general advice for a man who is struggling well, this is specific to, let me ask it this way, because I know, Will, you have a coaching program where you're working with men specifically on how to repair disorder in their marriage, right? What kind of general advice would you give to a man whose wife is complaining and is saying, you're not spending enough time with us, and he's scratching his head saying, look, I'm providing a nice life for you, what's the problem?
One misconception is what providing is all about, because you can be a billionaire and then ruin your marriage and have an awful relationship with your kids as well. And you're thinking you're just racking up numbers in a bank account and that makes you a man. But it doesn't. So many of these guys need to have a look at what their actual expenses are over the month and then think, what do I need to earn to cover these? How much extra do I need for conveniences? How much extra would luxuries be? Sure, we can all work for a couple of Lambos and a mansion that's far bigger than we actually need. But is that actually going to be you putting your time into what is most precious in life or not? Because if you focus on that kind of material providing, you end up being a slave in many ways to your boss or your clients, whoever it is. And it's being a slave to your own greed as well. And you'll pay the price, like Tim was saying, in terms of time, which you can never get back. And you don't find, there are probably a couple of psychopathic ones you could find, but you're not generally going to find guys who at the end of their lives are saying, you know what, I wish I'd worked more hours. And if you know that you need X amount of money and you can find a job that pays you in a time efficient way to achieve that, and it frees you up to actually provide for your family morally, spiritually, enjoy time with them, actually have the availability in your schedule to lead them properly and really invest in those relationships, that's how you win at life. That's how you beat feminism as well. That's how you raise strong girls, strong boys, and have a good relationship with your wife too. Like Tim's saying, Steph is his best friend. That's how it's supposed to be between husband and wife. That's what being one flesh is all about.
What about this tendency, and what would you say to a man who follows this tendency to blame his wife, right? So, I'm doing what I believe I need to do. She's struggling. She has a problem. I'm happy. How does he confront her? What kind of language does he use in order to solve the situation?
Most guys are too quick to argue back and then get into a bickering match with their wives, which ends up being very belittling for them, especially if they're getting frustrated, losing their temper, and hopping about like an angry little toddler, just complaining at her. You end up with your wife just looking at you like you're another kid. Better just to be quiet, listen to what she's saying, and then sift through the emotion, because women tend to be quite emotional compared to men when they're complaining about things, at least men who are being masculine, and then drill down to the couple of things that are in her complaints that you can take responsibility for and that you can change, and then just suggest solutions. Don't go bringing up other problems and play the game where you say, well, what about the time when you did this and that really annoyed me and hurt my feelings? Just listen and then lead the way out with practical solutions. And have the humility as well to realize that you might have been doing a bad job of running some of the important areas of your household because you've been too focused on colleagues, too focused on office, emails, and you haven't actually kept your eye on what's happening at home. Because everything that happens in your home as a man is under your watch. You can delegate things to your wife. She has her duty as a woman, but ultimately everything is on your watch. So these guys who lose their minds because they go over budget for the month or something. Why weren't you aware of this? Why hadn't you planned out? Why didn't you know the trajectory of the finances? Why hadn't you told your wife what she should be spending? You've been too busy focused on things that aren't your top priority.
Tim, general advice for a man who's struggling with a complaining wife. He thinks he's doing everything right. He's providing. She's not satisfied. First of all, what paradigm, what should be his mindset? And then, secondly, like I followed up with, well, how does he resolve that? What does he do? What kind of language does he use with her?
Do you mean like a wife that's complaining he's working too much, or more generally?
That tends
zoomed
to
out?
be one of the big complaints that guys hear. Now, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate myself here as I'm listening and asking this question. Is it? Yeah, I don't want to add complexity. I'll do that part next.
Yeah.
What is your point on what are your thoughts on that? A woman, she's telling him, hey, you know what? I'm not satisfied. You're not spending enough time. I'm not getting what I want. He's scratching his head because he's like, chick, I bought you a nice house and a nice car, and and I'm doing my best. What do I do? What do you want?
Generally speaking, patriarchal households should follow the one bite of the apple rule, which is like, and it's awkward if you have to lay it out as such, because then it seems robotic and like you have Asperger's. But this is how it is with Steph and I. It's a friendship between unequals, as Aristotle calls it in Book 8 of the Nicomachean Ethics, and it's a best friendship between unequals. A husband who's in charge and a wife who's not. But things aren't awkward because you don't always say them like this, except maybe at the outset in feminist households where you have to make a regime change. There's one bite of the apple. Like my best friend and my counselor is Steph, my wife. And if she raises something, this is going to sound a lot like what Will said, because obviously we tend to pretty much give the same advice, but with different nuances. If she raises some point, she almost never is wrong, because she does it. I do not have a wife who nags. So she'll even give me advice about like, oh, with this video, we should keep this on Rumble only and YouTube. She just doesn't speak up that much unless it's correct, because she knows. But there are lots of times where I'll be like, that's interesting. Yeah, cool. Like Will said, you don't react emotionally, and then you just take it the other direction. A king has two war counselors, right? One says go to war, one says don't go to war. They each know, each of the war counselor knows, I'm responsible for making the best case for or against war, and I'm going to be listened to roughly half the time, holding all other things equal. This is what a wife is a good war counselor, where she'll raise the smartest, most glib iteration of the point she's advocating, and then leave it there. Yeah. And particularly women are more emotional, and I'm not saying anyone's perfect, not even my wife, but good wives will generally, when they're advocating for their own sort of emotional whimsy, even if it's a well-ordered emotional whimsy, like I want to see you more, which is very healthy. There might be the temptation to get more, to be tied to the argument more, but good women in patriarchal households know I shouldn't do this. With regard to, there's a really interesting point that Weber makes in the Protestant work ethic text that was so important for us Americans. It was so important for the Calvinists and the Puritans in early colonial America. He's basically characterizing the Protestant work ethic and the prosperity gospel. And he cites a guy called Baxter that says wealth and the trappings of wealth and the labor required to get it should be worn like a light cloak, meaning they're good. They should not ever become an iron cage. And that's, I think, what we're after here in seeking the work-life balance. Like, the extras are great, but they should be like a light cloak that you can take off at any time when the weather changes. Should not be an iron cage. And I will say this. I'm called a misogynist so much on the internet that people would be surprised to hear me say it. But a well-ordered wife under a patriarchy has a really good instinctual sense for this, like, because they want to be provided for. So it's not in the interest of the goodly wife to be like, just spend all your time with us.
Right.
That would be to the detriment of herself. So listen to your wife, unless she's a nagger, in which case, probably never listen. I just have a wife that doesn't speak up very often unless she's right. In the wrong case, she speaks up and she's wrong. She knows she has one bite of the apple. So I don't have the temptation to follow bad counsel pretty much ever.
Yeah. It's interesting how, we have good wives. I guess it begins with that, right? Like Colleen, for example, she orders herself to supporting my work. And she'll just pop in every once in a while and say, hey, do you need anything? Do you want anything? Can I fill up your water bottle? Can I make you a snack? And she even sometimes, like when she's overflowing with desire for me, she'll almost apologize sometimes. Like, I know you need to work, but I just want you. I just need you right now. But she's like, not wagging her finger, like, give me more of you. She's like, I know you got to do what you got to do, but I just want you to know that, you know, I'm needing you right now, and almost, you know, apologize. And I love that. I just love that meekness. I love that attitude. And like Tim said, man, like that was so spot on. Like the opposite would be if I'm not working. I'm sure she'd probably be scratching her head like, yo, why isn't this dude working? Like we need money. What are you doing? Right? So like it's in her best interest that I'm working.
That's it. But then it's hard for some men to accept that more money doesn't necessarily mean better husband, better father. It can actually end up emasculating you very easily. And that's one of the things that is at the heart of the crisis of masculinity. So the idea that some partner in a law firm who works 70 plus, some of these guys might even hit 80-hour weeks and sleep in the office. I know people like that. The idea that he can point to his salary and say, I'm more of a man than Tim Gordon is, and Tim should have stayed at this firm and been living like me. That's how you make a success at life. That's absurd. And men need to actually just sit down and confront that blunt fact and accept the consequences.
So part of what I wanted to, you know, I was kind of edging at here with you guys is like, you know, on a practical level, right? Like, how do you resolve that? Like, you know, especially for a guy who's confused. And Tim said something, you know, very factual, that like women are often more caught up in their feelings. And a lot of times women's feelings are their facts. Now, are they objective facts? Well, maybe not. But whatever they're feeling is true in the moment, and they will take that to the bank. And so, you know, I think a lot of times we can, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but like if you then bow down and kowtow to your wife's emotional whims, right? Where you're you're doing things right, you know you're doing the right thing, you're there when you need to be. It seems out of pocket for her to be behaving this way. And Will said this as well too. Like, first of all, don't get emotional, don't get wrapped up, don't allow her to drag you into her turmoil. But second of all, it's all about feelings with women. Like, it might not even necessarily be the amount of time. She says she wants you, but it doesn't mean that, okay, that means, oh, okay, I got to come home earlier, or okay, I need to spend more time with her. What she's really saying is I'm not feeling I'm getting enough from you. And that can be resolved through intensity. So even if the schedule is the same and I can't give you more, but when you are with her, you got to tickle her. You got to get her to feel something, anything. Women will be stimulated and attracted even with negative feelings sometimes, right? By worry, or, you know, make her even angry. And I'm not saying do this, but like that is magnetizing. That, like, at least we have some vibe going on between us rather than complete apathy, right? And so there are things that you like my mom and dad are like that. Like, my dad pisses my mom off and it drives her in a good way crazy. Like she can't stop thinking about him because, like, oh, that man, he's doing something, you know, because my dad always does dangerous things like climbs up on the top of the roof, and like she's freaking out. But if he wasn't giving her, so she gets mad and like she's got feelings, and I'm like, Ma, and she like jokes sometimes. She says, I need to find myself a nice, calm man. I'm like, Ma, you would be so bored with a nice, calm man. You want my dad because he freaks you out and gives you feelings. And the fact is, she's addicted to those feelings. You know, my mom's a woman, just like any woman. They want to feel something. And so, but my dad doesn't get wrapped up in it. He laughs and he says, she'll figure it out. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. You got to know your own woman. I gave advice that I learned. I watched my brother do this. Years ago, he had a woman that he was dating, and she was always upset about something. And he just discovered that if he just brings her home ice cream, problem solved. All he has to do is make sure when he gets home, ice cream's on the table. And she's
It's a dangerous
happy.
game, brother. Yeah,
What's that?
Ice cream every day. That's a dangerous game.
Well, it looked like she ate ice cream every day after a while. So I think he found the limitations in that one.
Yeah. I mean, whoever told these guys, I'll combine both what you said, Elliot, and what you said, Will. Whoever told these guys that you can be a complete man by just doing one of the job descriptions did them a tremendous disservice. Like, the job of a man, of a father and a husband, is to provide, right, that P, but to play with them, to pray with them, and to protect them as well. They're not tending to any of the three others. To play with them, to pray with them, and to protect them. And those three are actually on a kind of ontological taxonomy of importance, far higher than provide. Provides like the bare minimum. And remember when Theoden of Rohan says, none of my riders can bear you as a burden. They have to survive a 3-day ride to battle and then battle afterward. That's what a man should be thinking as he goes off to work in the morning with his coffee or whatever. It's just like, I gotta do this for 8 to 10 hours and then go home with the strength for my real job to begin. My real job is playing with, praying with, protecting. This usually has a moral trajectory because it's not like robbers are breaking in every day. But those are the three jobs. And I don't know if it was Greatest Generation or the boomers after them that just, in this WASP context, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, became Kevin Arnold's dad on Wonder Years, where he gets home, sit in the chair with the beer, or just go outside and look up at the starlight, which is understandable to need a minute alone. But then you got to go back in the house after that minute and be animated, energetic, dynamic. You got to be leading the prayer, not just sitting idly through it as the wife leads. This is how everyone becomes dysphoric. You got to go actually roll on the floor with your boy or do whatever you do as a father to bond with your girls. You can't just pray with them. You have to play with them and pray with them. And you have to be there. Protecting can even be something, not just racking the shotgun, but saying things like, okay, what'd you learn at school today for normies who send their kids to schools? Were you taught that Jim can have a baby at school today? Because that's not true. That's protection. And you have to do so with some verve. So I don't know where these guys got told, there's one super virtue that can get all the virtues. Aristotle responds to Plato like, no, you got to get each of the virtues one at a time. These guys, you can't just do one exercise and just do bench press all day long every day. You're like, no guy would do that. You have to do all the things as a father. And making money is not the one main one. It's the entry, it's the entry level job task.
Yeah, you got to keep it in its proper place, not let it take over.
Yeah.
Tim, you made me think of something, in terms of speaking with the children when you come home, right? Like, I guess for some guys, well, first of all, we're operating in one way when we're at work, when we're working. We're one person, literally, right? And then to come home and have to, switch it off and be something else, right? You don't talk to your children the way you talk to your law firm partners or anything like that, right? Transition time's totally important. Definitely a good thing to do. But one of the things that allows me to I have teenage kids now, right? So I'm not rolling around with them any longer. I'm not tossing them around any longer. That doesn't happen, especially with my teenage daughters. Like, that would be weird. My son, we'll wrestle a little bit once in a while. But Tim talked about debriefing. If you send your kids to school, you should ask them, what did you learn today? He used the term normie because, you're gonna deal with some of those normal people things. But I have a question, and that's my question. I have a question that all my kids, they get nervous when I ask because they know Dad's about to do some debriefing. And so it's funny, we were at I'll do this every once in a while, and they all go, "Oh!" When Dad goes, "I have a question." So we'll be sitting around the table. They'll be having a conversation. I have daughters, so and my wife. They'll be chatting, and me and my son, we're both just sitting there quietly. Like my son's even really quiet, so we'll just sit there. And then all of a sudden, I'm listening, I'm paying attention. I have a question, and they all go, "Oh no, oh no!" But it means that Dad's about to dig into something that I think is pretty important. And whatever it is that you guys are chewing on right now, or experiences you're having, or, I'll even hear my kids do have iPads and phones, and so they're consuming pop culture stuff. And I'll hear, one of my daughters maybe repeat some lyrics to some trashy song, and I'll be like, "Okay, I have a question." And it's like, oh boy, I'm gonna pour it on. So that is a part of the protection, right? Asking questions, debriefing, having conversations about the crazy things that are happening in our world. It's not just about racking shotgun, like you said. It's about asking them questions. So on that note, I have some questions here, just a handful. Let's work through these before we wrap up today. So in no particular order, I have this one here. Let's see if I can move this around from Sven. He says, "My question is about family-friends balance. When should you end a friendship? My friends still take drugs. I'm a 25-year-old Catholic man who just got married, and I'm about to have my first child. What are your thoughts on a situation like that?" That's legit. Yeah, it's not just work, it's friends, what you're doing outside the house. Will, what are your thoughts?
Speak the truth, tell them it's wrong, and you want no part in it, and don't hang out with them while they're doing it. Because if you're talking about psychedelics, which I imagine you are, then the church is clear that that's always wrong for them to be taking them recreationally. Could be illegal as well. So you don't want to be enabling your friend's behavior, because it's bad for them and could land them in all kinds of trouble. So if you're a good friend, you'll be saying they need to stop all that. And some people might react to that by deciding they aren't your friend anymore and cutting themselves out of your life, which is fine. You haven't cut them out. You just told them the truth. And if they can't handle that and the wall comes down from their side, that's it. You've done what you need to do. Might listen to you and then stop taking the drugs and think, you know what, he's right. Then you've been a really good friend to them.
Tim, thoughts?
Well, I shared with you guys something I'd never shared on my channel, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it wasn't drugs. It was, this is, oh man, how long have I been out of the crew? Almost 10 years ago now. No, I think it was 11 years ago. I can't remember. Where it was divorce, for Christians. We can't have divorce. And my friend wanted to marry a divorced girl, and I was like, well, I can't hang out with you when you guys do that. And this is my childhood friend that I went through from grade school through middle school, high school, college with, and it was a big group of surrogate family like friends. We played in the band together with a bunch of the core group of these guys. And once I said that, I was like, look, see if she can get an annulment. If not, then I can't be around you, because that's the equivalent of Nick Carraway going around with Daisy and her concubine or whatever, and her husband and his concubine. That's really two-faced, and it's more than that. It's formal cooperation with the evil, or at least proximate material cooperation with the evil. You can't cooperate with adultery or any other grave matter. So they all turned on me, and it was like, okay, this is tough. And I was already one of the married guys. So it's like, well, I would have done this anyway, because speak the truth always. But that kind of situation just doesn't come up when you're in high school or college or touring around in a rock band, because none of you are married. But it was like, all right, so this is how it is. So you were going to be crucified in white martyrdom far more often than red martyrdom, and I'm willing to accept it. So usually when you tell your buddy to stop doing something that brings them illicit pleasure, like drugs or fornication, then they're not going to like it. But sometimes they listen and they're like, I really respect you. You're my one true friend that actually told me the truth.
Yeah. I would say that I've been in a similar situation, but I'm a bit extreme. So let me begin with, what's relatable, and then I'll share my wackiness. Um, we moved out here from St. Pete, so I'm living in rural Florida right now. And when I was back in St. Pete, it was a city, and I had lots of quote unquote friends. I had the gym there, guys that worked for me, guys that worked with me, clients and stuff. So, I accrued a lot of people, I guess you could say, and we would do things. And I was grateful to have this space by moving away, 2.5 hours away. And last summer, a couple of the guys decided they wanted to come out to Orlando, and they have young families now too. My kids are a bit older, but Colleen and I decided, hey, let's link up with the old folks, because we have like, well, I have no friends out here, and I'm not really even looking for any. I'll get to that in a moment. Colleen, all her friends are, 80-year-old church ladies, because she just goes to Bible studies. And you know what that is. Like, it's all old ladies, senior citizens. But she's okay with that. She has fun with that. And my kids, they complain a little bit, but they get to go to sports and stuff, so they do have friends. I have no friends. So I was like, okay, let me socialize a little bit. I brought my family down there, and it was miserable because, one guy got so hammered that we couldn't, I thought we were going to have a nice like adult dinner, afterwards, he was so hungover and drunk, he couldn't even come out, all day long, just drinking and just stupidity. I was like, what am I doing? Why am I here? I couldn't figure it out. And I realized at that point that I don't want friends. I don't need friends. In fact, my dad has this saying, he says, make no useless friends. And so, that may not sound charitable. It may, it sound like utilitarian. I'm not sure I disagree with my dad, because it's like, his question is, why are you here? Why are you in my life? What is your point? Right. And so if I have friends that are not only not adding to my life, right? Okay. I have to ask myself, what value are you bringing? But also you're making my life harder by exposing me to, your drunkenness and, having a bad time because, maybe you're high or whatever the case may be. So my opinion is, and this comes straight from Edmund Hulse, that's my dad. You don't need friends. You got your wife, and that's my dad's idea. He's like, I got my wife, I got my children, my grandchildren. What do I need more people for? What do I need you for? And if I do have you in my life, there has to be a good reason why. So in a way, I'm saying in an extreme way, cut your friends out. You don't need them. Why do you have them? Just get rid of them. If I do have anybody I consider friends today, it's because they're married Christian businessmen. They're me. And so we can relate. Like these two gentlemen that you're seeing right here, I can call these guys my friends because we totally relate on a lot of different levels. And as a result, they bring value, right? I can ask them questions that, somebody who's not a married Christian businessman or specifically Catholic, I can't ask you those questions. I can't get support from you. I don't want to pick your brain. I don't want to know what you think. I don't want to watch the way you live your life. You're just an anchor. And so if they are in my life, it's because there's a reason.
That's it. And that can just be as a consequence of living with integrity and drive, because you just purge the people who shouldn't be in your life because they can't cope with you. If you're just going through life, speaking the truth and living according to it, those people naturally fall away because they just get burnt by it. It's like if like the vampires, the sunlight comes out and they all flee. And, we wish they would hang around, and the ones that do are going to benefit from it. Like I've got a friend who, not Christian, but he said the other day, well, I'd like to start reading the Bible. Where should I start? Because he'd become interested. And yes, that could be a good way in with people. But some other people, you say something on social media and then it stings them and then they don't want to be friends anymore. And that's fine.
Yeah.
What you were saying, Elliot, is key. You'd really, I think, enjoy reading book 8 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle's treatise on the 3 types of friendship. 2 are accidental forms, which are not real forms. It's really, really simple and vindicating to read. The high school students, when they read, oh, there are 3 types of friendship. That's it. No more, no less. There's friendships of pleasure, the lowest form, most accidental form of friendship, where you're only around each other for the kinds of pleasures conferred. You get into trouble together. These are like my rapscallionish friends when I was getting into petty mischief, in middle school, maybe some early high school. And there's basically no personal bond there whatsoever. The slightly higher form is a friendship of utility, where you kind of use each other. And like the kid down the street with the ping pong table, like little Sheldon. You didn't like Sheldon at all. It was this ping pong table. Aristotle does say actually friendships of pleasure are in some ways higher than utility, because you're actually enjoying something that is other than virtue in the person. Like, oh, this person's got a good enough personality. We crack wise a lot. We get into trouble. So in that sense, friendships of pleasure are higher than utility. Utility is not even something attached to the person. It's Sheldon has a PS5 down the street, or a ping pong table. You and maybe your friends of pleasure go down to your friend of utility's house just because he's got the swimming pool and the PlayStation. But the only true form of friendship, which you were knocking on the door of saying this exactly, Elliot, is one, like attracts like, opposites do not attract. This is an enlightenment lie, a lie from the Enlightenment, where a good man attracts a good man. One good man might be extra courageous and have one of the other natural virtues, magnanimity. His friend might be pretty courageous and pretty magnanimous, but admires that in the friend. And friend B might be extra superlatively amicable and liberal with his money and have super high integrity. And friend A might admire that in friend B, even though they both have 9 out of 10 on each of these natural virtues, and they're drawn to each other for virtue. And so there's a kind of pleasure, the pleasure of doing the right thing, which is what the Nicomachean ethics is all about. There's a kind of utility in the friendship. It's useful to become a better person, but not the crass pleasure or utility that typifies the lower friendships. You're right to assume that your circle of friends will grow smaller as you get older. Mm-hmm. Your main friend becomes your wife, and but that doesn't mean that's your only friend. If you have any male friends, they should be friendships that are called true friendships. They're based around virtue. They make you better being around them. Aristotle makes it actually beautiful in book 8 of the Nicomachean Ethics. Nicomachean Ethics is a book every man should read. It's the book every man should read, whether you're a Christian or not. You'll become a Christian.
That's the last book that I taught before I was sacked, because the exams were canceled from COVID, and all the teachers were told, you can teach whatever you want. And I said, I'm teaching that. And then we just went through that with a bunch of the boys, and they loved it. Like, truth when you see it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, truth is attractive. So we got a question here from Drew Johnson. Drew says he's 45 years old, and he still can't figure out how to be at home after being at work all day. He says it isn't fun. What advice do you guys have for Drew? Well,
why are you assuming things always have to be fun? That's what 3-year-olds think. So I would just kill the fun seeking. You will find fun in it once you see the value in it and the meaning in it, because this is your purpose as a man. When you're at home and you find out about how your wife's day has been, your kids, you're educating them, you're not just killing time. This is your most valuable time. So you need to reconnect with the fact that it can be hard, and you might need to hide your tiredness and all the rest of it. But what you're really battling against there is just effeminacy. You don't want to do the important thing, the right thing, because you're not in the mood. But men don't do things just because they're in the mood or not, right? Otherwise, you can easily end up just being a guy who is obese because he eats whenever he feels like it, or a guy who never goes to the gym because he doesn't feel like it. Right. The whole thing is, you are the one who's decided what the right thing to do is, irrespective of whether it is fun or not, and you do it. And you do it for long enough, and then you habituate that habit, becomes the virtue, fortitude, and then you're going to be a better man because of it, and you'll actually enjoy living the right way. Tim's brought up Aristotle. he makes the point that when you're educating children, first of all, you just basically tell them, do this because I say so. Because they haven't got the sense to know what they're supposed to be doing yet. You do it because dad says so. But then further down the line, they actually understand, and that's what I should be doing. Dad was right. Now we can talk about why he said that. It's the same thing as a 45-year-old man when you're just saying, here's how I'm going to spend my time. I don't care if it's fun or not. I care about what's true and what's important, and just do it.
Amen.
Yeah, something I always get from these shows on Friday mornings, no lie, no exaggeration, is with like two other successful fathers. By successful, I mean they're heading other good big families. Is like I was doing it this morning. Like Elliot's like, oh, even once I finish here, I go walk the dogs. I'm like, I should probably go walk my dogs more often. Elliot says 3 things per show. I'm like, I should probably do that. Like, I'm pretty good. We have a good routine around here, our economy, our household economy. But I like that. It always will stick with me how Elliot said, well, I get my boy up and we'll go for a hike. The girls can sleep in. That's feminine. That's stuck with me for so long. There's 3 things per show. Will's talking, and we're on kind of text all day because we're running this matchmaking thing. And I'm like, man, I just picked so much up from you guys. This just vindicates what you said earlier about Elliot. It's like, well, there's no fit. It's pure discomfiture if I try to talk to someone that's not a patriarch. How do you spend your day? What's your workload like? What are your temptations to fall away from what you do? They're all just totally different. It's not apposite. But when I talk to you guys, I'm like, I love how Will does this. I love how Elliot does this. It happens every Friday without fail that I'm like, these are little tools to put in the toolbox, things you guys are saying. It's so valuable.
And that's what the CMAS show is all about.
Yeah, baby.
Yes.
Cool. Anything for Drew? Any advice about coming home after work?
What's your routine? Write it on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like things that aren't fun become fun. I think it's just Will's answer fleshed out slightly. Like things that aren't fun, like literally the things I hear you guys do, like I don't really want to go take the dogs for a walk. But once you habituate them, you start getting endorphin flow from doing them. Mm-hmm. And when they're ergonomics that are needed to be served and you're not, you just look at them as an unpleasant task with dread. And everybody else suffers for them not being done. But it's like, okay, are you praying sufficient amount with your family? Are you playing, if you can squeeze in a half hour of play with your kids before dinner, okay, you don't just go home and take a shower immediately or whatever. After dinner, are you like doing some sort of family reading for a half hour? It's not necessarily that it will be fun, but it's something that you're nailing down. If you have small or medium-aged kids, whatever. If you have teenagers, even just like, hey, let's sit around the fire for 15 minutes and everyone just tell me, look, is there anything I need to know from your day? If not that, we'll just say we'll knock out a decade of the Rosary together and maybe watch a 22-minute episode of some show on Netflix. I mean, that's an evening's worth of stuff right there. And we haven't even gone to anything extra advanced in terms of what families ought to be doing with each other.
Yep. Yeah. And something I learned from the gym as well, actually, is that if you're just putting in 80% effort on the important things for long enough, you're going to make most of the progress that you're going to make. So make a list of all the things you know you should be doing as a husband, as a father, and then get that 80% effort in for years. And you've got about 20 years for the really important part of raising the child. You're a parent for life, but that first 20 years is a lot that's demanded of you. Mm-hmm. That 80% done the whole time is a lot better than you going on some sort of patriarchy bender for a year and then getting really obsessive about it with a clipboard and then forgetting about it for the rest of the time because you burn out because it's too much for you. So 80%, keep it light touch, be cool about it, but consistently, day in, day out, for decades.
That is such good advice in so many areas. I love how you use it as a gym analogy, but now that I'm reflecting, I'm like, yeah, that's how I live my family life. Like I'd never go hardcore great dad. I never try to be like world's greatest dad. it's 80%. It's just like touch and go. Keep it going. Yeah, I think a lot of times we want to be extravagant, or we want to do something novel and like be the TV dad that like does great big things. The only thing I would add to Drew is here's a saying, take it as you wish. My mother used to say, because when I was a kid, I'd like kids. I would say, I'm bored. My mom would always say, that's because you're a boring person. If you're not having fun, it's because you're not a fun person. And you know what the good thing about that is? That means you can change. So if and I'm going to say it in another funny way, but like if everywhere you go smells like cabbage, maybe it's just you, right? So you got to change. We got two more here. Amidst my dream, he says, so is career ambition a sin? I ask this recognizing the telos is not Lambos and mansions, but grinding hard to pay off my debts and save my future spouse and children. No wife and children yet. He follows up, I remember reading before, he says, sometimes I feel guilty. Should he feel guilty? Is this a sin?
It's not a sin to be able to provide materially for your wife and kids. Money itself isn't bad. Money isn't the root of all evil. The love of it is, the inordinate love of it. You can be a very, very wealthy, virtuous Christian man. You can be a billionaire as long as you haven't got that disordered attachment to it. So it's ranked up in your life into a place where it shouldn't be, and it's harming your relationship with your family and your relationship with God. So no, especially if you've got debt to pay off, get that debt. Get rid of it. Kill it.
Yeah, debt is a sin, or could be.
Yeah, potentially.
I'll recur to Baxter. It's not a sin if you wear the wealth like a light cloak. As long as it's not an iron cage. If it's an iron cage for you, then it means it's sinful, but not otherwise.
Very good. And last one here, kind of a off kilter question, but maybe you guys can add some value to Ron Key. He says, what are some good side hustles for supporting your family as a Christian? I'll chime in with that first, because I grew up watching my dad have side hustles. And so as an example, my dad fixed cars, right? And so he would be at the shop all day fixing cars, but he would also have take-home jobs. And that would allow him to be at home. He'd be in the garage. And we knew he was home. And even if he was in the garage, we had to walk on P's and Q's. But the side hustle was just doing more of what he already does, but doing it in a fashion that's conducive to his family's health. Not staying at the shop longer, just bringing home some work. I don't know if that's a side hustle, but it's like, hey, if you need to earn more, you do a little bit more, as long as you're not sacrificing your family.
Yeah, moonlight as what you already do, but independently. A lot of guys in the trades do this. So it could be plumber, electrician, whatever. And then they're a contractor, and then they can also do some extra stuff outside the hours that they have to work every day. The question, what's a good side hustle? I'm just going to give you a little warning. If you're the kind of guy who's going to really make a success of having a side hustle, you will have already done some research about it. Like, look at what other people are doing and then ask yourself about the commitment that involves. It's a lot harder to get things off the ground than it seems when you see other people doing it, which is why not many people actually are entrepreneurs or have successful businesses going. So you can't half-ass it. Most people actually need to have any kind of security net ripped out from underneath them to make something work. Otherwise, it always just stays an idea. The side hustle never materializes. So for me and for Tim, getting fired, well, you have to make it work, what you're doing next, especially if people are scared to employ you in schools afterwards because they know that you are not in line with the current agenda. Elliot's never had a boss. He's always had to make it work. If you listen to Elliot's story about when he was a young man, hours and hours and hours, because if he doesn't make it work, no one's coming to help him. And you know what? It's actually true that no one is coming to save you except Jesus, but even he isn't going to take your suffering away. He's going to ennoble it and use it to turn you into a better man, but he's not going to take it away from you. So just accept that it's going to be difficult and there'll be suffering, whatever you're going to do. And you might need to leave the job that currently isn't providing enough for your family and find something totally different, more efficient, that pays more. The side hustle might not be the actual option. Just a total career path change could be the way forward.
I like it. I like it a lot. Tim, anything to add?
That's really good. That's a really solid answer from all angles. Listen to that.
Cool. Well, we'll wrap up, and just want to give a couple of shout outs to my guests. And of course, you guys are, if you're watching this, you're probably familiar with this show. I guess we've been doing this. How long have we been doing this? Has it been a year yet?
Almost. I think 10 months.
Wow. Pretty cool. Yeah. So we've been doing this for a while. Tim and Will are, I'm pretty excited to share this with you guys. I thought we were going to, I forgot. I want to do it, but we'll maybe do it the next time they show up on our show, which would be approximately 3 weeks from now. They're running a Catholic matchmaking program. And I would love for you guys just to give a quick shout about that. And of course, before that, I'm kind of like giving you guys a heads up. If you know Catholic men, Catholic women, virtuous people who are looking to be equally yoked, stay tuned. Definitely chime in. That's what we'll be talking about next time here on my channel. But in the meantime, I love this. Take advantage of what these guys are putting out there. Briefly, just where I think we did this once before, but just to keep it top of mind, briefly, where can people learn more about what you guys are doing?
You go, Tim.
It's www.return.us, RETVRN.us. It's been really exciting. This is an idea. I think the initial email, speaking of entrepreneurship, was dropped May the 24th by our mutual friend, me and Wells. And the idea came off the ground in June. And we were originally trying to get 15 men, Christian Catholic men and 15 Catholic women to pair. And it just exploded because we had so many viable young women. The men pay, the women don't. And now we're literally looking to pair, the pools are 7 times that in terms of the females and something like 4 times that with the men. So it's been really amazing, and we already have some really strong couples paired, and this just got going June, July, August. So it's www.retvRN.us. A lot of amazing people aged 20 to 40 who have not otherwise enjoyed success out there on the body market. Thanks, Elliot.
You got it. All right. Well, that's it. That's all. Love y'all. And we'll be, I guess, on Will's show next week. Go follow Will over at nolandknows.com. Rules for Retrogrades. Tim, go follow him over there, and we'll continue the conversation. You guys have a great weekend. God bless. We're out.
Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks.
Got it.